And we are live. Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to She Built It Boss Lady Chronicles. I am Sharita Gaskins-Tillett. I am your host, and this is the show where we feature the stories of extraordinary women who are owning their power to transform their lives. I am super excited about tonight's guest. But before I share about her, I just want to share with you guys what a wonderful, awesome, spectacular weekend we just had in Grand Cayman this past weekend. We had the Fall A Weekend for Me event, and it was absolutely amazing. We spent some time getting in touch with ourselves, reconnecting with who we are and kind of what makes us tick. We dreamed about our ideal life. We looked at what life would be like if we could write our own story, which we know we can. Spoiler alert. And then we set goals for 2025. And so the ladies who attended are returning home with a strategic plan, a personalized strategic plan for the first 90 days of 2025. But more important, they are going home with a renewed sense of self and a renewed sense of power. So, if you were thinking about joining us for a weekend for me, you weren't able to this time, definitely jump on the VIP waiting list because the 2025 dates will be released in the next couple of weeks, and I would love to host you. So let's jump into tonight's episode. Tonight I have joining me Dr. Joanne Stekler. Dr. Joanne is a physician scientist and an infectious disease doctor in Seattle, Washington, who focuses on HIV and STI prevention and treatment. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when she was at home with her elementary school child, she started sharing recipes and photos of her decades of love for cooking and baking. In 2021, she started her recipe blog, uglyducklingbakery.com, where she shares made from scratch recipes for weeknight dinners, weekend baking, and cocktails using fresh seasonal ingredients. Welcome, Dr. Joanne.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. And I wish I had been on Grand Cayman with you too.
Oh wow, it was amazing. I'm telling you that island is so beautiful. It's actually one of the most beautiful islands I've ever visited. The water is crystal clear, the sand is pristine, and the people are just so friendly and welcoming. And it was just a beautiful experience for all involved. So maybe you can join us some other time.
Maybe
Um,
when it gets dark here in Seattle, that would be a great escape.
yes, yes. So let's jump right in. So you are an infectious disease physician by training. Tell us a little bit about your journey through medicine. Did you always want to be a physician? How did you come to choose infectious disease?
Yeah, I did not always intend to be a physician. I actually thought I was going to be a PhD like my parents. Both my mother and my father were PhDs in economics. And I thought I was going to go do something like math or chemistry or psychology. And I was probably in my second year of college when I thought, I actually want to go to medical school. My parents thought I was crazy. They were like, you can't even cut your meat without, getting all strange about like the blood vessels in your chicken. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to eat my patients, right?
Right.
So I did one horrible year that was all lab classes. I think I did 4 or 5 lab classes during my junior year of college, and then went straight to medical school. And there like many of us, I didn't know what it was I wanted to do in medicine. I thought pediatrics. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon for a very short period of time. I thought I wanted to do OB-GYN and take care of women. And then I had a absolutely great mentor who absolutely, this was in the early 1990s. And for those of you who weren't around, HIV was a growing problem in the 1980s. And we didn't have good HIV medicines until mid 1990s. And so when I was in medical school in the early 1990s, people really didn't have a lot of options. And I had a professor I was working with who just loved and cared for his patients in whatever way we could. And then there was the moment of, oh my gosh, we have medicines, and things were life changing. And so it was really at that point that I want to do this. I want to be the doctor for my and know my patients really well. I want to be involved in their, all parts of their intimate lives, um, and yet also be a primary care provider, which I really love, getting to know people and having them tell me about their lives. So that was sort of, I knew I wanted to do work in HIV and HIV care and HIV prevention since medical school. I went to residency here at the University of Washington intending to focus on HIV care.
Wow, I think that's really admirable. And as I was listening to you talk, it's such a calling because I think about that patient population in particular. I recall I did a fourth year elective with somebody at Hopkins who was doing, heading an HIV clinic for women, for pregnant women in particular. And that was really transformative because it was a little bit farther along. There were some drugs by the time I attended, but still, almost I would almost call it like a forgotten population back
Mhm.
then. Now with the way that things are and the drugs and the longevity, people with HIV, people who are living with HIV blend in with society, but they didn't as much back then.
No, it's amazing, and I feel very lucky that I came along at a place where I don't have the PTSD, the post traumatic stress disorder, that some of the providers who are a couple years older than me had when all of their patients were dying. I mean, I started residency in 1997, so by that point we had the cocktail. It wasn't great. People had to take a lot of pills a lot of times a day. It made them sick at times. But seeing that transition from not having anything to having some medicines to really, at this point, we have one pill once a day regimens that people can take and they can live a normal life expectancy. We tell people that if they get on medicines and their virus level gets to undetectable, that they can't transmit, whether it's a mom to her baby or someone to their partners. And then I, right now, for the last, about 10 years, have focused on something called PrEP, HIV pre exposure prophylaxis, where people can take, it started off with pills, so one pill once a day, but now we have an injection that someone can take every couple of months. And hopefully in 2025, we'll have an injection that people can take once every 6 months to prevent them from getting HIV. And it works really well at preventing HIV. And so, my shortish career,
Mhm.
you've seen all of these changes, which have just been amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's absolutely wonderful, wonderful work. Um, so now let's fast forward just a little bit to the pandemic and to this baking this baking situation. I guess how do you go from taking care of HIV patients and then also beyond that being an infectious disease physician in the middle of a pandemic to to doing a food blog? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it seems actually pretty obvious in retrospect. So I was impacted mostly because I had a very young child who was in school when the pandemic hit, and then was out of school when the pandemic hit. And I was home with them the whole time because my husband at the time was flying for a airline, and they continued to fly. So he was gone for days at a time and I was just at home. And so I actually couldn't, for sort of a variety of reasons, I couldn't leave her at home. And so I wasn't as involved with COVID as many of my colleagues in my division were. I offered to do remote work at the time, but most of the work, it was people showing up and doing treatment and doing research studies. And it wasn't until months later that I was able to get out of the house and be able to participate some. So even though I'm an infectious disease physician, I was not on the front lines like many of my colleagues were. And but I was, I think, trying to help understand what was going on. There was a lot of fear at the
Yes.
time. I mean, in February and March of 2020, we didn't know what the COVID, what the virus was. We didn't know how it was transmitted. We don't know how to prevent transmission. We certainly didn't have vaccines or medicines or anything in those days. And so I remember in March of 2021 that I was, we were sharing on social media eh, all of the papers that were getting published. And there was so much panic that I actually felt a little guilty about sharing all of that information. And I remember one day that I just said, "Okay, I'm done. Let me ask you about how to make a good bean burger," because we were cooking. Everyone was at home. Everyone was cooking all the time. I've been cooking forever. I've been the one who was by my mother's side, learning how to cook and bake. And so the idea that I would be cooking more during the pandemic wasn't surprising to me, but I was like, I really wanted to know how to make a good bean burger because I, even though I was a vegetarian for a long time, I started eating meat again, but I still love vegetarian food. Like needed that bean burger, and they're always so mushy, right? Like you bite into you bite in, and I
Yeah,
don't know if you eat meat or not, but you bite into a burger, and it's got this mouth feel that is just I don't know, amazing. I'm gonna use some adjectives that probably shouldn't. But but the Bean Burgers are just like you bite into it and it squishes out the side. You're like, what is this? And yes, it's a vehicle for cheese and relish and avocado and whatever your favorite condiments are.
sure.
But I was like, I still want that mouthfeel if I'm gonna have a bean burger. And so people gave me all sorts of suggestions. I don't know how many bean burgers I made during early 2021. And then I just kept asking, I'd share what we were eating and share, and my photos at that time were absolutely horrible. I mean, they're still not great. I am not a photographer, and had no skill when I started. I have a little bit of skill now, but yeah, those some of those early photos were horrible. But I just kept doing it, and I stopped for a few days, and people would ask me to post again, and I was like, I'm just sharing my dinner, what we ate, and it was just diverting for everybody who was trying not to be completely freaked out by all the uncertainty. So that's how it started.
Okay, so now what made you start sharing the recipes? Were people asking?
Yeah, I mean, so originally, and my husband jokes when before the pandemic and in this early part, I was tied to recipes. I wouldn't deviate from a recipe at all. The idea that I could create recipes, I I would have thought you were nuts. And so I would just link to, oh, hey, this cookbook. I really love this
Mm,
cookbook. I really
okay.
love this website. And that's how it started. And then I started just making up. I mean, I always had some recipes that I've made for, like my pesto recipe that I've made forever and ever and ever. It's just, and the way I cook, chicken breasts is like, so some of it was obvious, was just the like, I'm gonna write this stuff down. There was so much to learn. Like you all think, oh, it's blogging, it's so easy to do. There's so much new, right? I mean, you probably know this doing a podcast. How much of your, background education prepared you for setting up a
Yeah,
podcast?
none.
Like none at
0.
all. So I had to learn website and website design and Google and social media. I mean, I never had Instagram. I had a Facebook account, but I didn't have Instagram. I certainly didn't have TikTok. TikTok still scares me. But yeah, I mean, just
So did
there
you
has been so
you taught yourself all of these things? Because I find it interesting. I mentioned that I just spent the weekend in Grand Cayman with a group of women. Turns out, I don't limit my trips to just physicians, but there were only physicians traveling on this particular one. And they were talking about the technology. And I guess I take it for granted to an extent, because I did always do yeah, or I have for years now done social media and things like
Mhm.
that. But when they mentioned like Zoom, they were like, we didn't know what to do with Zoom. We didn't know, how to do. We don't know how to do a podcast. We can't believe you're on camera talking every week. And I just, it didn't. It seems second nature almost at this point. And so it's interesting to me because I just, you can Google or YouTube just about anything you want to
Mhm.
learn. And so that's
Yeah.
probably where I got a lot of things from. But what about you? Did you teach these things to yourself or did you have help?
It's a mix of everything, right? And just I love Zoom. I have been doing telemedicine visits since 2015 in my prep clinic, and so when Zoom, like the Zoom boom happened, I was like, I've done this for like 10
Right.
years already. Um, But no, it was a combination of online. There's some great Facebook groups for food bloggers, and I now have a
Mm,
community of food bloggers that we support each other and promote each other, and that it's a lot of trial by error, a lot of making mistakes, right? You got to be not afraid to make mistakes. Um, photography. I had a few more expert photographers who said, you know that button on your phone, right? Like the level, like there's a level on your phone. I'm like, oh wow, and then I just, I started playing with natural light. I was like, oh, my light in my dining room is horrible. And you're like, oh, natural light is the thing. So
yeah.
so people give you recommendations. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. I've paid for some consultations at this point for some technical stuff for my website. I've taken a few classes, although I probably could take more. It's just about finding time and prioritizing everything.
Yeah, but I like I like the information that you're laying out for folks.
Mhm,
In terms of, embracing something new. The first thing you said was that you just kept trying. A lot of times we try something the first time. If it doesn't work, we just abandon it. Okay,
mhm,
I'm bad at that, and we move on. But I admire your resilience. You decided to
yeah,
keep trying, and you took each quote unquote failure, each kind of miss as a lesson
mhm,
to help you move in the right direction. And then you got help,
mhm,
when where help was needed. So I really like that because it's important. We talk here in Boss Lady Dream Builders, it's about building our dreams. But like I said, sometimes we get stuck and we don't, want to, if we are not good, especially us high achieving women who are used to being good at things. If we're not good at something the first time, it's like we want to run and hide and be
mhm,
embarrassed and all of that. But really, we have to give ourselves some grace because you're not going to be good at the outset of almost anything that you've never done before. But if you keep at it, you can acquire the skills that you need. One of my coaches always says, "You learn the Krebs cycle." If you could learn the Krebs cycle, you can
and
learn
forget the Krebs
anything.
cycle. Yeah. No, absolutely. And you bring up 2 points. One is showing up, right? Showing up and showing up every day and rolling with it and all of that. It's none of this is quick, instant, like all of a sudden you're gonna be like there are a few people who may sort of rise to success that way, but the vast majority of us don't. The other is something that's super important that I have not completely learned, but which is avoiding the comparison trap, right?
Mm,
That there are
huge.
people who have done incredible things, and you're like, oh, why don't I have that? Why didn't I get that opportunity? Why? And you just everybody's path is their own, is the
Exactly.
other thing, and you just have to accept like. This is what I'm walking. This is the time I have. This is the energy I have. This is the direction I want to go. And trying to just go, that's great for that person. That's not me. That's not my
Right.
path.
Yeah. Yeah. Also from this weekend with the ladies, we talked about being designer originals, that nobody else is exactly like you. Nobody has your gifts and talents. Nobody has your brain. And so you have a unique offering for the world that nobody else can imitate. And so there's no point in trying to be like anyone else because they have their unique set of gifts and talents as well. And you're right. And they say comparison is the thief of joy. So if
Mhm,
you're comparing yourself to other people all the time, you won't embrace your greatness. You won't find yours. You'll be trying to be an imitator instead of being the original that you were designed to be.
mhm. Yeah, those are great points.
So now, I saw on your blog that you like to kind of interject some science along with. So to me, it almost seems like this is a mix of art and science, which I know cooking is. But tell me a bit about how you intertwine the two and science specifically, because I almost got the impression that the science helps to um, inform how the recipe comes together.
Oh my gosh, there are so many things in that question. Uh, one of it is that I said I never thought that I would create recipes, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that's been reassuring to me is that there are basic formulas for putting together many things. So it's when I said I was doing recipes, one of my friends said, "How are you doing this? You know, how you have no training?" And you're like, "Well, it's there's a chocolate chip cookie, and most chocolate chip cookies are pretty similar, and you just vary this a little bit, and maybe instead of chocolate chips, it's butterscotch chips, right?" So much of it is just sort of the tiny variations and being detailed and for as a as a scientist, even though I'm a clinical epidemiologist as opposed to a lab scientist, I find it really easy to write recipes and give instructions because it's just like writing a methods section of a paper.
Uh-huh.
So there's that. Um, there is, when you were talking, you make me talk about science. I mean, one of the things I really love, and this is one thing that permeates throughout my blog, is that my love of the color purple. And one of the
Mm,
things that's super interesting about the chemicals in foods that are colored purple. So, I didn't even really realize that there were that many purple foods, but they're purple sweet potatoes and purple peas, and is that they're all um, uh, combination of this group of chemicals called anthocyanins. I think that's right. And they vary based on the pH of the soil, which is why your purple cabbage is red or your red cabbage is purple, right? It's just
mhm.
because that it changes. So more acidic will make it red, less acidic will make it even sort of blue. And so there's one, I think it's in my coleslaw recipe where my kiddo and I actually did a experiment where we took slices of the cabbage and added either vinegar or baking soda to it and watched the colors change. I mean, that isn't about recipes, but it's just there's so much in recipes that is about chemicals. I mean, baking soda, right? Like baking soda is absolutely fascinating in terms of what it does. Like the difference between baking soda and baking powder, um, just because you need acid to activate the baking
Right.
soda in order for you to get bubbles for your whatever it is to rise. I mean, there is so much. I don't feel like I am about the science um, as much as perhaps some people. I mean, I think of somebody like Kenji Lopez Alt, who really talks about science in his recipe writing and recipe testing. I don't feel like that's me as much, but I really like understanding the why of why some things are the way they are, how some things are related, both in terms of sort of chemical structure, but also I mean recipes migrate around the world, and so taking cultural adaptations,
Mm.
there's a uh, like shakshuka. Do you know what shakshuka
I
is?
don't.
Shakshuka's I believe it's Iraqi dish that was adopted by Israel. So it's a sort of Israeli dish that is tomatoes and peppers with eggs cooked in it, and it's completely similar to. Uh, there's an Italian dish that is exactly like that, where
Mm.
you basically have a pan of tomato sauce and you just poach the eggs in it. And so watching these sort of same things, like dumplings are the same way. Every culture has a dumpling. Like, how do these foods migrate as the people migrate and they take their favorite
Right.
recipes,
Right.
but perhaps they don't have the same ingredients in wherever they've moved to because it's across the
So then
world.
things get adapted and change.
I think that's fascinating.
It is. It is absolutely. Now, the other thing I would think though, with understanding, because what I'm hearing is that understanding some of the science behind the way certain things come together, maybe at least for me, it sounds like it would, or seems to me, it would give you more confidence in doing recipes because we're physicians, we love a good algorithm, right? And so if you know that if you put this, like I saw something the other day talking about using cold butter in flour to make
Mhm,
your biscuits more flaky,
mhm.
you know. And so I would never have known that had I not seen that particular thing. And so I think knowing things like that, or knowing exactly what baking powder will do versus baking soda, I would think it makes you a more confident cook and a more confident recipe maker.
Perhaps, or perhaps when my recipes fail, it makes me more likely to try and understand
Ah,
why.
okay.
I have one cake. I was trying to do a martini cake, so it had juniper in it and lime. No, I'm sorry, gin and tonic cake. And it kept falling, and I couldn't figure out why it kept falling. And yeah, so maybe the scientific method and the scientific inquiry helps with that.
Yeah. So now your blog is called Ugly Duckling Bakery. What's that about?
Well, I have this story on my in my about page, but I am a grant dependent research scientist, and grants are hard to come by sometimes. And so every time I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have a job in 6 months, I would think, well, that's okay. I'll just go work in a bakery. And literally, I mean, this was, I don't know how many, every couple years I would have oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm going to go work in a bakery. And there was one time that my husband and I were driving to Eastern Washington to go skiing, and we were talking about what that bakery would be called. And we decided, because not only do I not photograph well, but I also don't decorate cakes and cookies really well. But we decided that that it have to be the Ugly Duckling, because it's sort of it doesn't look like something that's absolutely beautiful, but on the other underneath it, it is just like the most delicious stuff. I always used to say that people would never accuse me of trying to pawn something off as store bought,
Yeah.
or as mine that I had bought, because all the stuff it's like there's stuff falling apart, and there's a corner missing of the pie, and all this stuff. So that was the Ugly Duckling Bakery. And so when I started the blog, I just decided to use that name. Now, I will never, at this point, one of the things I have realized over the last couple of years is I have no interest ever in working in a actual bakery anymore, because those folks work a whole lot.
Yes.
And if I'm leaving medicine to try and, change my life and take it back a notch, and
Yes.
I'm not working in a bakery. I'm not certainly not going to start my own bakery, but this has been a entertaining sort of few years, and has really opened my eyes to perhaps things I'll do in the future post retirement.
So speaking of, where do you think you're
Mhm.
going with this then?
I would like to write a cookbook. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure what that cookbook is, but I feel like I want to have a product. I want to have something. Other than that, I don't know. I have talked with folks about teaching classes, teaching how to cook. One of my blogging friends does classes, and she's invited me to join her one time to do that. And as somebody who gives lectures about topics that I'm familiar with all the time, I'm like, okay. I mean, I think most of the reason I don't do video now is that I don't like the editing of video, but I'm perfectly happy to talk on camera. And so I don't know how good a teacher I would be about that, but that's something I might do. I don't know, but cookbook is definitely in my dreams.
Okay. Now, I did see that you also like to travel,
Mhm,
take cooking classes when you travel.
mhm.
What's been the best experience with that so far?
Oh gosh. So that, I mean, that list is, I took a year off in the middle of school, and I did a cooking class in Thailand. When I was pregnant with my kiddo, I went to Mexico and did a Mexican cooking class. I spent a couple days in Rome with a British author named Diane Seed, who wrote a bunch of books in English about Italian cooking. I don't know if that I have a
You don't have a
favorite. I mean,
favorite?
there were, yeah, it was just I think that for me, that travel and food are so critically important, that that's something I like to do, is take a class. I like to run through the cities, right? I think that's one of the best ways to see cities when you travel, is to go for a run with, ideally, a tour guide who I've done this with, like, college kids who they know their city, and they give great tours, but also someone who is able to share their food of wherever you are.
Yeah, yeah. So, with this, how can I put this?
Just
No,
spit it out.
it just seems that you have this zest for life and this appreciation for other cultures. When you talk about the integration, or well, not so much the integration, but the migration of recipes from one culture to the next, and then kind of almost immersing yourself in a new place, and I just love that because it's just so respectful of everyone else, but it's also so educational. And I would suspect that you find that there are more similarities than there are differences between different cultures. Would you say that?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, and love of food is not particular to any culture at all.
No, no, absolutely. So now tell us, if we're interested in following your blog, how can we do that?
Yeah, I am Ugly Duckling Bakery everywhere. So my blog is uglyducklingbakery.com, and I am on almost all the socials, although some more than others, as Ugly Duckling Bakery. So I hang out most probably on Facebook, some on Instagram, and I am really enjoying Threads, which is the
Ah,
meta
okay.
version that's sort of equivalent of X.
Okay. All right. And so it's recipes, food recipes. You said dinners, weeknight dinners. So they're under 30 minutes or less, more or less?
Some.
Some?
So
Okay.
I like to spend time in the kitchen, and so there are some that are under 30 minutes. I don't cut many corners, there are not mixes in my recipes, but there's a can of beans for pizza beans, and those are ready in 30 minutes, or a quick pasta, one pot pasta. But I also am not afraid to spend a little bit of time with a glass of wine on a weekend. So it's really celebrating fresh and baked from scratch and made from scratch related stuff. I have a vegetable garden. I try to bring in the stuff that's from the garden. Um, yeah, I have no real niche, which is,
Uh-huh.
one of the downsides, but that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, I actually saw something recently about seasonal cooking and
Mhm,
seasonal eating and how much better it is for us.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the closer your food is, the better it is for the environment. You'll get food that is better tasting, right? Tomatoes that are midwinter are gonna taste horrible, so why eat them?
Yeah. Yeah. So now and then also baking and then
Mhm.
cocktails. We didn't talk about the cocktails. How does that factor in?
How did that happen? Oh my gosh. So I've got all sorts of stories about that, but, really it was Google made me do it. So there's keyword research where in order for people to find you, you want to have low competition, but people are searching for it, right? So you don't want to write recipes that are this random thing because no one's ever going to find you that way. And so I started doing cocktails because they were some of the easiest keywords to do. And actually, that one of the
Interesting.
well, because the advertisers don't pay as much for them
Okay.
because it's, alcohol and drugs right? Like, they're harder for advertisers to get into, so you get lower ad reimbursement for them. So they're less competitive.
Mhm.
Um, but I realized, so, we like a occasional martini, but I didn't really understand how cocktails were made. I mean, I'm going to go back to formulas. It's so formulaic. There's a direct relationship between a martini and a Manhattan and an old fashioned, and you vary, your base liquor, and maybe you vary a few other, you're going to use sugar syrup or sweet vermouth, right? Like, they're still the same thing. And so one of the things I'm in the process of doing is building out how do you learn to make your own cocktails, because it's really easy. Um, so that has been something that I've been known for. In our Facebook group, some of the ladies encouraged me to do this 52 weeks of cocktails. So when I first started, I was doing 52 weeks of baking, and they were like, "You should do this with cocktails." So every week, every Friday-ish, I post a cocktail based on the challenge that we set for the year. And so I think last week was whiskey, and I think I did a whiskey sour of some variation. I have a cranberry gimlet made with cranberry infused gin that I just shared that's going to be for the infusion week
Yeah.
where you can, you chop up some fruit, you put it in your alcohol. It works really well with jalapenos too. So you can make your
Really?
yeah, so I make a spicy margarita by infusing jalapeno into tequila. So you don't actually have to have fresh jalapeno sitting in your drink. Yeah, I mean it's been fun. I'm not sure where that's
Sounds
gonna
like it.
go.
So now do
But
you entertain, or do you just do all of this for yourself and your family?
Uh, it is I mean, we entertain some, but, mostly these are the foods that we're cooking. I do bake every Tuesday. I have to bake today for
Okay.
tomorrow's team meeting, and, it's mostly been cookies with some cakes and whatever they do, but I have my Linzer cookies is what's on the docket for tomorrow, so I'm just softening my butter right now and, gonna make those over the course of the next, hopefully not too long, but we'll see when we go to bed tonight after with elections, right? So
Yes.
so that's been a weekly thing too.
Oh,
But
great. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I love that, that you're doing something that you love, something that
mhm,
speaks to you and brings you joy, in spite of everything that's going on around us. Like you're going to be baking tonight, even though we're waiting for election results to come in. So that should
gotta
be somewhat therapeutic, right?
yeah, and distracting. It's
Yes.
all of that. Yeah, I don't if I didn't love it, I wouldn't put as many hours into it as I do. So
Yeah, well, wonderful. So go follow Dr. Joanne on at the uglyducklingbakery.com and on all the socials. It's really interesting to follow the 52 cocktails, the 52 weeks of baking, and all of those things. You can get some really great ideas for your weeknight recipes. Check out her website. I looked at the what was it, the barbecue chicken meatballs, I think
oh,
it was called. I looked
they're
at that.
they're yeah, please make those. Those are the recipe I am most proud of as something that I really did from scratch. So, and I like meatballs too. Meatballs are very fun, and that barbecue sauce, my husband says he'll eat on a shoe. He thinks it's so good.
Wow.
So,
It reminds me
yeah.
of one I used to make years ago. My best friend and I, when we were just out of college, made our used to make our own barbecue sauce
Mhm,
for barbecue ribs. So
mhm.
that's what it reminds me. When I look at the ingredients, it reminds me of that. So I'll have to try. I haven't done my own barbecue sauce in many years.
Oh,
So
it's so good. It's so good.
you
I
have
did a
to
peach
try
a
it.
peach one too this summer if you have, peaches frozen right now, but the peach bourbon, but yeah, that original barbecue sauce is really, really remarkable.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, for inspiring us to follow our own path. And like I said, to find our joy. You're still working in medicine, but you're also doing things that feed your soul. Because most people wouldn't necessarily think of a physician as being someone who's doing food blogs and creating cocktails and those kinds of things. So if you are a high achieving woman and you're interested in learning how to find your own path, we are getting ready to do a goal setting workshop for 2025. It will be on Saturday, November 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So we'll actually go through the whole goal setting. We'll do some dreaming. Boss Lady Dream Builders, we have to dream. We'll do some dreaming and some visioning about our preferred future, but then we'll set goals so that we can begin to move in that direction. So if you are trying to get a good handle, get a good running start on 2025, please join us again November 23rd at 11 a.m. Eastern. The link will be in the comments. And thank you again, Dr. Joanne, for joining us tonight and sharing your wonderful story with us.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Have a great night, guys.